Friends, good evening. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is your channel, Gnosis Arizona, and today we have a very beautiful lecture. It is titled, You Are Not Your Thoughts. And You're Not Your Thoughts is based on the teachings of Samael on a lecture that he titled, The Awakening of the Consciousness. And this is a very peculiar lecture because it is very likely that even though we're here sharing this information, you're listening, we're speaking, we're experiencing different sensations from the environment. Maybe we think that we are awake. That is so common. Maybe we think that we are awake. Samael, he tells us, the rational animal, he drives his car while he sleeps. He works in the factory and in the office while he sleeps. He falls in love while dreaming. He marries dreaming. He lives in a dream world and he is convinced that he is awake. And all it takes is just a little bit of observation of our daily activities so that we can tell what is really happening with our particular state of consciousness. It is not uncommon for us to go from here to there, and when we get there, just ask ourselves, how did I get here? For many people, it's even common to walk from one room into the next, and when they're at the door and they're looking, they stop cold and they say, what was I going to do? And if that is the state in which we find ourselves with various degrees of frequency, then it is important that we ask ourselves what is really happening with our state of consciousness. The moment that we are able to reach a conclusion that we are wandering through life while sleeping, the great masters tell us that is when we understand the need to awaken. And behind all of this, there is one simple cause. The cause behind humanity's deep state of sleep is called fascination. Now, this fascination is very peculiar. More so when we listen to what the great masters teach us and when they say that in the origin of the words, we tend to find deep wisdom. Specific to this word fascination, fascination means in its origin an enchantment. It is a spell. It even applies to the concept of witchcraft. Now, this does not mean that somebody is throwing spells at us. This does not mean that we are victims of some dark magic. We don't have to go that far. But what this is saying is that there is a force that is creating within us an enchantment. It is a spell that is moving us into a space where nothing else matters except that aspect of us that is deeply submerged in the indulgence of some very particular sensations. And we have seen many of these examples, perhaps in our lives, perhaps in the lives of those who are close to us. For example, those who are fascinated by alcohol, by pleasures, by adventure, by friends, we have seen the way that they operate. We have seen the way that they behave. We have seen their indulgences and to the degree in which they will push many circumstances. I mean, there are others of us that we become fascinated with our physical bodies. We become fascinated with the charms of our personality, and we will do things that are very peculiar, eerie, in many cases, even weird. There are many of us as well who are fascinated with our riches, with our belongings, with the money we have, with the properties, and we even use that to define ourselves before the world. And for those of us who are very sincere, hard workers, we even see this degree of fascination in our daily activities. There are many of us who are fascinated with our hard work. We are fascinated with the quality of our work, with the company that we work for, even with our unionized brothers as we complete work. And yes, it is true that as we are exercising work, as we are generating products, as we are serving others, well, there can be a sense of pride and satisfaction, as for example, the pride in a good job. But things like these, they refer to very peculiar aspects of the psyche. For example, the pride that we feel when we are doing a good job, well, this is a sensation that emerges deep within from induced by an achievement, by accomplishing something that is tied to some particular identity. That identity could be the self. So if we think that we are a great lawyer or a great engineer or a great welder or electrician, etc., well, we may be so identified with that identity that the achievement and the sensation of it, well, comes tied to that. And we cannot confuse that pride with a sense of satisfaction. Because the sense of satisfaction is associated to the ability to satisfy a need. And when we satisfy a need in service for others, well, then the manifestation that is experienced internally is not one that is associated necessarily to the ego. It is more something that is moved by that which is divine in each and every one of us. When we experience satisfaction for the work that we do, knowing that we are satisfying a need and that we are bringing about an improvement of the environment, an improvement of conditions for the benefit of others, that satisfaction brings about harmony. And that harmony fills us in such a way that there is no need for external validation. The pride that comes to the achievement that is tied to our identity, that one is always looking for validation. And when it comes to that validation, that's when we become fascinated with our hard work, with people acknowledging how sacrificed we are, how many hours we invest, etc., etc. And even as parents, there are many instances in life in which we find ourselves fascinated with our children. We are fascinated with their achievements. We are fascinated with their setbacks. And in that fascination, there are parents that even compare their children to the children of others. And we should never be making such comparisons. So as you can see, this concept of fascination has us under a spell. We are enchanted. We are constantly seeking to be satisfying a series of sensations, looking for acknowledgments and things of the sort. And as a consequence, we have loose focus on the target. Instead of focusing on the work that truly matters, on sacrificing for the benefit of others, on eliminating anything that is inferior within us, on cultivating faculties, abilities, virtues, we are just distracted. And in that distraction, we make many mistakes. Every day, as we go to bed each night, the moment that our physical body falls asleep, our ego escapes the physical body. Every night, when the physical body rests, the ego escapes and it carries its dreams into the dream state. It brings with it all of its fascinations into the internal worlds. As the physical body falls asleep, the ego always escapes, and that is what is known as an astral projection. But there's more to the astral projection, more on that later. It is necessary for the ego to abandon the physical form every night, because in what we are today, we are not just a physical body, a personality, and a consciousness. Between the physical body and the personality, we see that there is some sort of a binding element. That binding element, we could refer to it today as a lunar soul. a lunar soul because our soul is not yet radiant. It is still not splendorous. And whenever our physical body falls asleep, that lunar soul must disconnect, must unfold, move out of the physical body so that our ethereal form, the vital body or the ethereal body, can then exercise its duty, repairing and restoring the physical body for function when it wakes up the next day. The only way that that ethereal body can truly work on regenerating the physicality is by allowing that ego with all of its fascinations just to move out of it so that it can intensely work repairing the physicality. And while that is happening and we are off in our astral experience, the ego then brings with it all of its dreams. It takes all of its fascinations and it takes all of its considerations and fears and judgments, etc. And it continues to play the same dramas in the astral plane as it was running them in the physical plane. I mean, the ego will carry its dreams into the inner worlds and even continue with the same activities that kept it fascinated, distracted while it was here in the physical plane. And maybe we can say that you know this. Because how many times have we not gone to sleep and continued dreaming about the problems that we were dealing with while we were awake? How many times have we not gone to sleep and woken up the next day exceedingly tired, worn out, because the preoccupations were so intense that they continued taxing and demanding energy and stress and tension from the physical body while the ethereal body was trying to restore the physicality. So we have an opportunity to do something about this. All of these thoughts that we think that we are not that. We have an opportunity to start using some very simple keys so that we can start making a distinction of what are these thoughts, what are these emotions that I am experiencing, and what is the thing that is truly divine, that is incarnated within, so that we can empower that to come into work. That simple activity is we have to start asking ourselves moment after moment, am I in the physical body? This is a very simple exercise of discernment. But let me tell you why we share this. If the ego today is bringing into the sleep state the same habits, the same considerations, the same fascinations and dreams during the day into the dream state, if we start modifying the habits that we exercise while our physical body is awake, we then bring those good habits into the dream state and we can get benefit from that. Ask yourself, am I in my physical body? And not only that, the moment that you ask that, make sure that you grab one of your fingers and pull it. Because you will see, and hopefully if you have experienced this, leave it down in the comments, you will see that the moment that you pull your finger and you happen to find yourself in the astral plane, because the matter that in which we exist in the astral plane is slightly different than this dense matter that must exist here in this dense realm of substance. With the law of levitation being a governing law in the astral plane, when you pull your finger, the finger will stretch. And at that moment, you will know that you are not in your physical body, that you are in the astral plane. So ask yourself, am I in the physical body? The more you ask of this during the day, the more you will start asking that yourself while your physical body is sleeping. And it will not take long for you to start experiencing moments in which you start awakening the consciousness. But let us tell you this. It is impossible for us to awaken the consciousness for as long as we continue to forget ourselves. And we do many things every day that lead us into forgetting ourselves. A good example of that is our social media. The moment that we connect to that phone, we start doom scrolling, and it does not take that long for us to fascinate with it, identify in such a way, and fall deeper into the state of conscious, into the sleep of the consciousness, that then when you look at the time, it has been 15, it has been 30, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of just scrolling. And it happens just in an instant. So how else is it that we continue to forget ourselves? When we just go with the flow of our inferior emotions. Somebody will say something that we dislike at home, at work, maybe one of our children, maybe we to our children and their reactions. And when we confront those circumstances, and when we say confront, we mean when we're there and try to perceive what is happening, well, instead of just understanding, how is this dynamic affecting the way that I think? How is it that this affects the way that I feel? How is it that my behavior gets swayed with these external forces, with these interior reactions? Instead of asking that, well, we just go with the flow of the argument, go with the flow of the fascination. And again, identification, fascination, and sleep of consciousness. This cycle is always the same. It repeats itself hundreds, if not thousands of times during the day. And now we have a very simple key to break away from that. We must start asking ourselves, am I in the physical body? Friends, fascination always happens because we identify. We identify with something that shocks us through the senses, whether it is the ear or the taste or the smell, whether it is something that we see, something that we feel. More so because the sense of touch is experienced in the largest organ of the body, which is the skin. So ask yourself, am I in the physical body? And we have to ask that while we are here and now. It is important that we practice this here so that we can bring the good habit into the astral plane. Because listen what Samael says. If the student has not awakened the consciousness here in the physical plane, much less has he awakened his consciousness in the higher planes. If we're here, we're not doing anything, we cannot think that we are a great master in the astral plane and that we do all of these other great deeds. We have to awaken the consciousness here. And as we work on doing that, the effect here replicates itself, reflects itself in the higher realms of creation, in the inner worlds. So as you start with this little practice about asking yourself, am I in the physical plane? As you start making use of this very simple key of discernment, let us share with you a little bit of a more advanced work. And it is the application of something that is known as the key of SOL. The key of Sol, or in Spanish, la clave de Sol. SOL here does not refer to that shining star in the firmament. SOL here is an acronym that stands for subject, object, and location. And when you apply the key of SOL, it is very true that at first it's going to become an intellectual exercise. But we must move away from this being an intellectual exercise and move into a space where we are empowering the consciousness to be the one perceiving. Because what we are seeking to do with the key of SOL is to split our attention in three. We are effectively making use of that cosmic law of the Triya Mashikamno. The Triya Mashikamno is the law of the Holy Three, because this combination of threes always invites the flow of creation. And what we're seeking to see manifested, to see created, is an awakened human, an awakened man. So the key of SOL seeks to split the attention in three. And what three things? In the subject, in the object, and in the location. When we speak of the subject, we know that we are already a trinity. We are a combination of three, of a body, a soul, and a personality. If we rephrase that a little bit, a physical body, a lunar astral body, or a soul, and of course a personality. A personality that is entirely energetic in nature. A personality that we need because it is our vehicle to be able to exchange and communicate with the environment. So what is it that we do in terms of the subject? What we are seeking to do is to empower the consciousness to receive and perceive the impact of the impressions that reach the senses. If we are fascinated with alcohol and we come across a cold beer on a hot sunny day, well, that identification with the cold beer will lead to maybe one, maybe two, and soon enough the fascination can lead us into 10 or 20 beers and many other things that happen afterwards. And we should not allow ourselves to fall into that space of forgetting ourselves, of that loss of remembrance of self. We must perceive the impact of the impression that is perceived by the senses. And the moment that we can perceive that, well, the ability itself to perceive it gives you an opportunity to remain centered and react or not react, fascinate or not fascinate. We're not advocating here. If you want to drink beer, that's great. But one thing is on enjoying responsibly, and another one with the loss of remembrance of self and taking us into space of a deeper sleep of the consciousness. This element of the subject, this thing that perceives, this combination of three, it can be perceived with the intimate remembrance of self above all kinds of representations. So any moment that you get shocked with something that you hear and catches your attention, something that you see and invites a distraction, something that you taste and invites you to forget yourself, some sensation that you may experience that invites the loss of remembrance of self, particularly the sensations that take place at the levels of the creative organs, where the sense of touch is tremendously magnified. We must be very aware of these, perceive them, and as we remain centered, prevent us from identifying with the sensation and flowing into the sleep of the consciousness. Now, the subject is this thing that is perceiving. It is the thing that receives the shock of the impression. The object are all of those things that come to us, that generate a particular shock in the senses. That object, it could be a chilled glass of wine. That object could be a beautiful human being, voluptuous, chiseled, muscular. That object could be a beautiful home. It could be anything that we perceive. And this object is all of the impressions that come directly into the senses. It is essential, friends, that we recognize this. Because as we perceive the object, we must remain aware sufficient to not identify with the circumstances that bring the object or the events that result in the object itself. So, as you see, we have our consciousness already focused in two of the three. On the thing that is receiving, on the thing that is being delivered for the senses to receive, and the third one, well, is just an extension of that key of discernment, is where am I? We must ask ourselves, what is this place? We must ask ourselves, what am I doing here? Because when we do that, this helps us recognize whether we are in the physical plane or we are in the astral plane. How many times have you not found yourself in a dream in your own home. And you know that the moment you go through certain door, you're expected to see something. But as you cross that threshold, you see something that is completely different. Some people have seen that there is a crocodile in their living room. Some people have opened the door to a bedroom to just open up and see that there is a big prairie, not a bedroom. And if we see these things, why are we not stopping there for a second and asking us, wait a minute, why is this here? What is this? Where am I? How many times in a dream have we not come across someone that we love dearly that has been long gone? Someone who has passed on. And when we see them, we fill ourselves with emotion. Their presence in that dream, in that astral experience is so shocking that we identify with it. We fascinate and we want to hug them. We want to speak to them. Rather than stopping for a second and saying, wait, why are you here? How come you're here? Where am I? What is this place? This type of new sense of awareness is what is going to bring us slowly into the awakening of the consciousness. And this is important that we do it. Listen to the words of Samael. Incredibly, when students observe themselves, they do not remember themselves. When they observe their laughter, their speech, and their walk, they forget ourselves. And you will notice that this is very common at first. We try to observe the way that we are walking. In many cases, people get so conscious of their way to walk that suddenly they forget how to synchronize the movement of the hands and the movement of the feet. They have to stop. In many cases, people listen to the way that they are expressing themselves, and as they do that, they become so self-conscious that self-consciousness invites them to identify with some weirdness. That weirdness takes them into fascination and then into the sleep of consciousness. And then they think, what do people think about me? And they feel cringe, etc. When that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen. We should just simply observe and observe without judgment. We should contemplate and perceive without justifying. When we empower the consciousness to split the attention in three, that is exactly what happens. The consciousness perceives and it gives you that sense of awareness so that you can immediately learn, identify what things here are out of place, and allow you to start moving, taking actions that shift you into higher levels of being. But what Samael says here, you may have already experienced, and if not, guaranteed that you will. It is very true. As we will make an effort to observe ourselves, if we are not making the right effort, we will identify with our own antics, with our own mannerisms. We will fascinate with them. Wake up at 3 a.m. and say, why did I say that? You see? And that is not what we need. We need to move out of that space of being in that deep state of that deep state of unconsciousness. This intimate remembrance of self is one of the faculties of that which is truly divine in each and every one of us. Inside of us that we carry this psyche, this consciousness. In the Eastern tradition, this buddhata. All of these faculties and abilities and virtues and powers and forces of our divine being, they exist all in potentiality within our consciousness. Within our body, we have the necessary source of energy, our creative energy, that we can use to help awaken these faculties. Each one of us has a very specific psychological trainer that is responsible of bringing us circumstances, conditions, causes, events, so that we can demonstrate that we are indeed making changes, that we are making progress in that ladder into higher levels of being. We have to take advantage of all of this. And we start by focusing the consciousness so that we become aware of the subconscious processes of the ego. Although this is something that is very basic, at the beginning, these will be some challenging actions because they will invite you to get very distracted. But you can overcome that quick. Observe the way that you speak. Observe the way that you laugh. Laugh. Have fun. Enjoy the moment. But don't fascinate and fall into the laughter of Aristophanes. Laugh and enjoy the moment. But if you're catching yourself that you're laughing out of control and your face hurts and your stomach hurts and you can't breathe, the moment that you realize that, you will see that you are deep in the sleep of consciousness. Be observant of the way that you walk. Are you dragging your feet? Are you constantly looking down? Are you walking as if you were defeated? No. Take a deep breath. Stand tall. Put your hands on your hips. Contemplate the environment around you. See that you are a divine part of this great creation. And then ask yourself, what thoughts were happening there that I did not detect, that led me to be walking like that? What emotions am I really feeling? What is this thing that I am feeling? What are these negative emotions that I experience? Ask yourself that so that you can identify what aggregate, what type of ego exists behind those subconscious thoughts, behind those inferior emotions that are ultimately expressed in an unconscious way on how we walk and on our gestures. Remember, empower the consciousness to split the attention in three. Three vectors of perception: to yourself, to the effort that you're making, and towards the ego that is being observed. The consciousness has this power, and it is an integral ability of the consciousness. Let's empower it so that it can work. But listen, the moment that you choose to start doing this, you are in for a surprise. Because the moment that you try to observe yourself, the moment that you try to make a change in life, any moment that you are seeking to break away from this cycle of identification, fascination, and sleep of consciousness, there will be an external force available. There will always be an opposing force, and that force is called the force of countertransference. Just like in classical physics, we know that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. The same thing happens at the level of the psyche. So as you try to understand your psychological aggregates, whether it is anger or revenge, whether it is lust or gluttony or envy or laziness or whatever it may be, as you try to understand it, it will rebel itself against the effort. And what will start happening is that you will fall into a psychological space where you are over-rationalizing any simple concept. No, that is one of the fallacies of the ego. We are not seeking to make of this an analytical process. No, we are seeking to empower the consciousness to open itself in such a way that it projects three vectors of attention: ourselves, our actions, and what we are experiencing, our efforts, and what we are living in the moment. If, for example, you are trying to observe psychological aggregates of lust, write it down. It will happen. Those psychological aggregates, based on the law of universal magnetism, will start bringing about circumstances that have to do with lust and fornication. As you try to understand your lust, it will be very easy for you to pull your social media and start finding all of these images that will invite identification, fascination, and further sleep of the consciousness with material that is of a sexual nature. If you happen to be trying to understand your psychological aggregates of anger, well, those defects in combination with that psychological trainer that is with us here and now, well, it's going to bring about fights. It's going to bring about arguments. It's going to bring about challenges so that you can either identify and fascinate or perceive them and demonstrate a little bit of mastery. If you are even trying to eliminate psychological aggregates of greed, greed is so dangerous because that greed will show you the greed of not being greedy, and because this is internal transformation work, it will even show you greed for faculties and powers and abilities. So remember, the moment that you embark in an effort of awakening the consciousness, the ego is going to rebel. And the force that the ego will use against you is known as the force of counter-transference. It is important that we understand this. We are seeking to move away into a space of being awakened. But I guess that so much has been said about awakening the consciousness that in a way, the whole concept, I guess it maybe has been abused, and maybe there has been a lot of lip service with very little results, and creates confusion. So when we're speaking about awakening the consciousness, how does that look like? Where is that taking us? First of all, let's start by saying that there are 4 different states of consciousness. It is only but a handful of people who go through some very dramatic events in life or some wonderful miracles in which today they are here and tomorrow their consciousness is fully awakened. Those cases may be a handful in the history of mankind, but they happen. Souls that have been working for many lives, suddenly they have reached a state that is very metastable, and something happens that tilts them into the side of that awakening, and they can then make use of everything that they have created, everything that they have worked for in cycles of lives after lives. Those cases exist. Maybe that's you, but maybe not. For the rest of us, how does this process of awakening look like? Well, there are 4 major stages of the awakening of the consciousness. These 4 states of consciousness, it's good that you understand them so that you can see yourself in any one where you may exist, and that you can see yourself as you are transitioning from one of these to the next one. The first state of consciousness is known as the dream state. In Greek, the state is known as ekasia. The dream state is the moment when your physical body is sleeping. Right there, the ego has walked out of the body. It is sleepwalking. It is projecting its dreams in the astral plane. While your physical body is asleep, your soul, your consciousness is out there. In the astral plane, the ethereal body is working intensely, retrieving from the solar energy that it traps in the spleen during the day, making use of that energy, redistributing it throughout the body, helping renew the abilities of perception, of thought, the chemical, biological functions of the body. This is why we allow the physical body to sleep. When we wake up very tired in the morning, it is because there has not been enough nourishment, enough water, there has not been exposure to those solar rays to allow that body to regenerate. So as the lunar astral body unfolds, as the ego is sleepwalking in the astral plane, in that dream state, what is happening is that the dreams that the ego is experiencing are completely illogical. Things make no sense. There is no real flow of events. It is cryptic images, one situation jumping into the next one. And all of these psychic functions are expressing themselves, but they are doing so with no direction. One is pulling this way, the other one that way. There is no net progress in any direction. So because there is no incoherent, there is no coherence, there is no continuity. And so we wake up in the morning Sometimes we don't even remember our dreams, and we just get back to work, and the ego continues with its dreams while the physical body is awake. So this is akasia. Once the physical body is awake, that is called the state of waking consciousness. In Greek, that is called pistis. And this is the moment that the ego comes back into the physical body. And you know very well when the ego comes back into the physical body, because the moment that it does, the eyes open. And you may even have a beautiful, detailed, clear recollection of everything that you dreamt the moment that you open your eyes. But because that astral body is resettling into the physicality, if at that moment you move, the moment you shake that astral body, the memories, they get lost. And in the split second that it takes you to just try to get up bed, that is enough for you to lose the memory of your dreams. That's something that we're going to overcome. We're going to overcome that too. But let's get back to this. So when the ego comes back into the physical body, well, eyes are open. If we allow the ego to continue carrying forth its dreams and all of its commitments and all of its desires, etc., we're going to continue now with an awakened physicality, but in a different type of sleep. The physical body will be doing certain things, in many cases, automatically, as a human robot. And internally, the dreams will continue. I want you to know that one of the most profound teachings that Samael gives is when he states, you are wherever your consciousness is. So your physical body may be awake, and you may be walking down a corridor in a supermarket, pushing a grocery cart. But if you're thinking about what you're cooking, and you're thinking about the ingredients that you need, you're really in the kitchen. You may be driving your car, and this is a dangerous one. Your body may be driving your car, but if you're still thinking that you're at the office, dealing with that project, dealing with those challenging circumstances, you are really back at the office. So these dreams, even though the physical body is awake, they will continue internally. And this is why the great masters tell us, people dream while the body is awake. If we don't do anything now, and we don't create good habits that can be carried into the astral plane so that we can awaken our consciousness there too, we're going to be trapped in this cycle of akasia, physical body asleep, physical body wakes up, pistis, dreaming while the body is awake, and then going back to sleep. And it is very difficult to get out of that cycle. With that key of discernment, with the key of SOL, you can start experiencing sparks of the next state of consciousness, which is the state of self-consciousness. In Greek, that state is known as dianoia or dianoia. This is the stage in which the practitioner starts becoming aware of himself. And you know when this is happening, because the moment that you start observing yourself, that you start seeking to comprehend, why is it that you're thinking this way? Why are you reacting that way? Why do you behave these ways? As you understand what defect is behind that, what aggregate exists there, and you invoke of a power superior to the mind to help you get rid of it. You invoke the fire of Kundalini, the fire of your Divine Mother. Whether you call it Maria, Mary, Mara, Ramio, Isis, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whenever you invoke within you that divine eternal principle, and like a child, you ask of your Divine Mother to help eliminate that which you have comprehended, you slowly start awakening. Because there is no vacuum in creation. The moment that you get rid of that inferior aspect in your psyche, there's no vacuum that can exist. So what comes to take that place is ability, faculty, powers, virtues of the innermost. And they slowly start growing. And the moment As you start experiencing sparks of self-consciousness, of dianoia, you're going to judge somebody, to criticize someone, and in an instant you see clearly in the eye of your mind, how is it that you do that same thing? How is it that the things that you judge in others are things that you yourself do? I mean, sometimes we are not as blatantly expressive as other people, right? We even go around murdering people, but you will see that the moment that you're going to judge, you realize, in my thoughts, I create just as much chaos and destruction. And it brings even a deeper reflection. This is the state of dianoia. At first, we will experience some sparks. The more we work on this, we start moving into a space where we become aware of ourselves. We are constantly centered. We're constantly perceiving the impressions, perceiving them at the point of entry, and right then and there transforming them. We see a beautiful human being walking in our direction with their great hair, their voluptuousness, or their chiseled jaw, or whatever and when we see that, rather than identifying and fascinating with that, to later see ourselves in performing inferior actions in the realm of the mind. No. We see that, and we apply the principle of synthesis. We see that beauty, we see that voluptuousness, we see those muscles, and we realize that's not going to last. Eventually, all that skin is going to get wrinkled. Eventually, that body is going to shrink in size, it's going to die, and it's going to either be cremated or it's going to decay in a graveyard. And that is something that happens in a split second, because the consciousness shows you how is it that all of these things are so temporal. How is it that, as the great Buddha teaches, all of this passes? So, dianoia is the stage in which the practitioner becomes aware of himself. And what do the masters say about this? They say, if someone were to awaken, they would be ashamed of themselves. They would immediately understand all of their antics. They will understand all of their ridiculousness. The process is methodical, and it allows us slowly to be receiving the virtues, faculties, attributes, abilities of our divine being, as we shed those inferior aspects, always invoking of that power that is superior to the mind. But there is still something beyond the dianoia. There's something beyond the state of self-consciousness, and it is the state of objective consciousness. That state is known as the state of nous. And the great masters, Quetzalcoatl, Hermes Trismegistus, Paracelsus, Hippocrates, Hermes, all of these great masters. The great master of all the masters, Yeshua ben Pandira, or the great master Jesus, they all experienced this state of objective consciousness. Because in their internal work, the effort was such that they sought to eliminate every inferior aspect that existed within, and the only thing that remained was perfection. They became perfect masters. And some of them, like the master of masters, Jesus, he went beyond that to become a master of perfection. And then what exists is none of this dramas and tragedies and comedies of the ego. No. All that there exists then is just the manifestation of our divine spirit through a consciousness that is fully awakened, with us as an instrument of our innermost. So what happens as you're going from one stage to the next? Well, if you are in the state of pistis, the waking consciousness, it is possible that you can experience sparks of dianoia. That is absolutely true. And as a matter of fact, there are many people who experience sparks of pistis while their physical body is asleep, when they are in akasia. So those of you who find it not uncommon to be awake in your dreams, I mean, you know what's going to happen. You know what things mean in the dream state. You choose to not eat that candy in the dream state, because when you're eating sweets in the dream state, well, that's an indication that you're going to have some sourness when you're awake. We'll speak about dreams later. But you start having all of these experiences in which you feel that you can control the flow of your dream. That is wonderful. It is wonderful that you're having those sparks of awakeness. But Samael says, if you feel that you're awake in your dreams, but you continue flowing with the drama in your dream, this is not awakened consciousness. While we sleep, we can experience sparks of wakened consciousness. While we are in waking consciousness, or the state of pistis, we can experience sparks of self-awareness, of dianoia. But just because we can experience sparks of that self-consciousness, we cannot fool ourselves into thinking, I am awakened. No. How many minutes of your day are you experiencing that self-awareness? If we're experiencing it for 3 seconds, we cannot consider for an instant that we are awakened. If we're experiencing it only for 10 minutes a day, it's still not enough. Still more work to be done. And those who are deep in that state of dianoia, of self-awareness, they can experience sparks of nous. They can experience the shock of the majesty of the divine being, of the innermost through them, of their real Father who is deep in secret. They can experience that. But more work must be done to fully transition into that state. So friends, for us to awaken our consciousness, we must work here and now. So let's clarify this concept of the consciousness. As we continue forth with these many sessions, you will see that things as a concept carry different meanings. They have different levels of significance. And, well, the great masters say we can understand all things at 7 distinct levels of depth, at 7 distinct levels of expression. So when we're speaking of consciousness, yes, we're speaking about that psychic material that we have been given. Psychic material that exists within us here and now, that we have incarnated from our own spirit. It is a spark of the great bonfire that is the human soul of our innermost. That is consciousness. But consciousness is also the psychic material that we have been given so that we can slowly, methodically start fabricating superior existential bodies of the being. So that at some point, by embracing the great mysteries of the super dynamic of love, that we can fabricate a solar astral body, a body that gives us immortality in the astral plane, a body that is radiant in nature. That beyond that we can become a Buddha, fully illuminated beings with a solar mental body, a body that allows us to live and exist within the mental plane. Beyond that we can fabricate a body of consciousness, a body of pure will. That causal body, well, it's a body that exists at the threshold of the 6th dimension of nature. And beyond that we can fabricate a body of the spiritual soul, of what is known as the Buddhic body. And beyond that, the body of Atman. That psyche, that consciousness, from the perspective of it being a psyche, it is the material that we have been given so that we can fabricate the collection of all of these superior existential bodies. That when they all come together, they are referred to in the sacred scriptures as the wedding garment of the soul. That's consciousness. From the perspective of our little session tonight, this concept of the consciousness is the apprehension of inner wisdom, independently of any mental activity. It is empowering this psyche to work in a way that is natural for itself, in which it perceives and comprehends the greatest mysteries of creation without the need of logical intervention, logical analysis. because it does not depend on the thinking process of the mind. It is important that we say this because it is not uncommon for us in general to confuse the concept of consciousness with intelligence. We tend to think, I can read books and I can do these problems and I can solve these other problems and I can do these things. There is intelligence there. I am conscious. No, it's not just that. Sometimes we think, I have all of this knowledge that I have gained throughout my academic career, and my different degrees have led me to a comprehension of this depth in these many subjects. Well, there is some consciousness in there, but it still goes beyond that. We tend to think, I think, therefore I am. Those were the words of whom? René Descartes. Yeah, there may be psychological functions. We may be having thoughts that eventually flow and manifest as feelings, as sentiments. We may have motor sensations. We may have impulses. Yes, there is consciousness in all that, but it goes beyond that. And what we are seeking to do with that little key of discernment, where am I? Where am I? The practice of the key of SOL, where the consciousness focuses those three vectors of attention into perceiving, into the thing that is perceived, and of course, where am I? That right there, it is that particular apprehension of that inner wisdom that we are seeking to put into practice, to strengthen as a daily activity so that we can move into higher levels of being. Samael says, the illusion of being continuously conscious as we think that we are today because we remember things and we walk here, there, etc., he says, is the product of memory. And it's the product of all thought processes. Being able to retrospect is not an equivalent to an awakened conscious. This is nothing more, he says. The ability to remember, to retrospect. He says this is nothing more than the act of remembering unconscious acts. So if we are relying on our memory is so fragile. Our memory can be tainted with so easily. I mean, we go through traumatic experiences and we add colors and descriptions to circumstances that other people who also lived them do not perceive those. Two people can observe the same event and walk out of there with a different perspective on what happened. And that is what happens when we rely on memory. So we must break past this illusion of being continually conscious. Just because we can remember things? No. That means that the connection of our brain with the mind is really good, that we can retrieve memory, but that is just nothing more than remembering unconscious acts. We must be there present at the moment, perceiving, so that we don't identify with the events, with the circumstances, so that we do not fascinate, and so that we do not fall deeper into the sleep of consciousness. So we will share with you an antidote that will start moving you into an upgraded degree of your current life. We must start becoming aware of what is happening in each one of the cylinders of the human machine. We must be aware of what is happening in our intellect, aware of what is happening in our emotions, aware of what is happening in our habits, aware of what is happening with our creative power, with that force that is profoundly sexual in nature inside each and every one of us. We must be aware of our instincts. I mean, we have to do that. So to do that, let's observe our habits. Let's observe how we think about things, about circumstances, how we think about people. Let's be observant how we feel about things, circumstances, people. So whenever you're speaking, whenever you're laughing, when you're walking, when you're eating, when you're thirsty, see what is going through your mind. See what is going through your heart. See how your body is expressing all of that. Ask yourself, where am I? Empower your consciousness so that you can see the object that is coming towards you. How is it that you are perceiving it? And consistently ask yourself, why am I here? Am I in my physical body? Is this the astral plane? As you do this, you will start developing what is known as the spatial sense. Suddenly, there would be no effort, and the consciousness would be habituated in such a way that everything that comes, it perceives, and you do not fascinate. I'd like to close with a very peculiar story that Samael shares. He says that one day he is walking, he's going to the lawyer. As he walks into the office of the lawyer, the secretary was there, the administrative assistant today. And he greets her, she greets him. He moves around, takes a seat in one of the chairs and the waiting area. And he says that he is looking at the little trinkets that were on the lady's desk. He notices that there is a butterfly made of glass. And as he observes that little butterfly, he notices that the butterfly starts moving its wings very gently. And he notices that and he says, wait a minute, what's happening here? So he looks at the lady, he stands up, excuses himself, he walks outside, and the moment that he is outside, he jumps. But he jumps with the intent of floating in air. Because in the astral plane, instead of the law of gravity, we have the law of levitation. The moment that he jumps, he remains suspended in air, as maybe many of you have found yourself flying while you're in dreams. And as he floats, he realizes, I am in the astral plane. Oh man. So he comes back down, he goes back into the office and he tells the lady, listen to me, wake up. Your body is sleeping out in your bed. We are in the astral plane. But he says, the lady was in such a deep state of sleep that she could not understand what I was saying. And she looked at him so confused. And realizing that, that he had left his physical body in bed and that he was conscious in the astral plane, he paid a reverence to the lady. He said goodbye. He walked outside and he jumped with the intent of floating, and he continued hovering within the airs of mystery and went to a specific location to continue with some internal work. You have the ability to do that. And we start by creating the good habits here in the state of waking consciousness. Friends, we were able to put this material together by looking at a lecture that Samael gave many years ago, back in the 1970s, titled The Revolution of the Consciousness, and also bringing together information from many of his books, namely The Buddha Necklace, The Perfect Matrimony, The Esoteric Treatise on Hermetic Astrology, and also his book on Fundamentals of Gnostic Education. So friends, as you see, you are not your thoughts. This has been our session for tonight. Thank you, everyone. We're deeply grateful for your generosity and your kindness. Thank you for being here with us this evening. May all beings be happy.